Pamplona or Iruña is the historical capital city of Navarre in Spain, and of the former Kingdom of Navarre. The city is famous worldwide for the running of the bulls during the San Fermín festival, which is held annually from July 6 to 14. This festival was brought to literary renown with the 1926 publication of Ernest Hemingway's novel The Sun Also Rises.After the 2015 municipal elections. There are 27 seats in Pamplona's municipal council, 10 of Navarre's People's Union, 5 of EH Bildu, 5 of Geroa Bai, 3 of the Socialist Party of Navarre, 3 of Aranzadi, and 1 of Izquierda-Ezkerra. Geography. Pamplona is located in the middle of Navarre in a rounded valley, known as the Basin of Pamplona, that links the mountainous north with the Ebro Valley. It is 92 kilometers from the city of San Sebastian, 117 kilometers from Bilbao, 735 kilometers from Paris, and 407 kilometers from Madrid. The climate and landscape of the basin is a transition between those two main Navarre's geographical regions. Its central position at crossroads has served as a commercial link between those very different natural parts of Navarre. The historical center of Pamplona is on the left bank of the Aga, a tributary of the Ebro. The city has developed on both sides of the river. Climate. The climate of Pamplona is normally classified as oceanic with influences of Mediterranean of a semi-continental variety. Precipitation patterns do not vary much over the course of the year as is typical of marine climates, but both classifications are possible due to the Mediterranean patterns of somewhat drier summer months. Sunshine hours are more similar to the oceanic coastal climate in nearby Basque locations than typical Spanish Mediterranean areas are, but rainfall is significantly lower than in Bilbao and especially San Sebastian. History. Foundation in Roman times. In the winter of 75–74 BC, the area served as a camp for the Roman general Pompey in the war against Sertorius. He is considered to be the founder of Pompaiello, which became Pamplona in modern Spanish. Actually it was the chief town of the Vascones, and they called it Iruña, the city. Roman Pompaiello was located in the province of Hispania Tarraconensis on the Asturica Berdegalum, the road from Berdegala to Asturica. It was a civitas stipendiaria in the jurisdiction of the conventus of Caesarea Augusta. Early Middle Ages. During the Germanic invasions of 409 and later as a result of Res ravaging, Pamplona went through much disruption and destruction, starting a cycle of general decline along with other towns across the Basque territory, but managing to keep some sort of urban life. During the Visigothic period, Pamplona alternated between self-rule, Visigoth domination, a Frankish suzerainty in the Duchy of Vasconia. In the years 466 to 472, Pamplona was conquered by the Visigoth Count Gauteric, but they seemed to abandon the restless position soon, struggling as the Visigoth kingdom was to survive and rearrange its lands after the defeats in Gaul. During the beginning of the 6th century, Pamplona probably stuck to an unstable self-rule, but in 541 Pamplona, along with other northern Iberian cities, was raided by the Franks. Circa 581, the Visigoth king Leovigild overcame the Basques, seized Pamplona, and founded in the town of Victoriacum. Despite the legend citing St. Fermín as the first bishop of Pamplona and his baptizing of 40,000 pagan inhabitants in just 3 days, the first reliable accounts of a bishop date from 589, when Bishop Liliolus attended the Third Council of Toledo. After 684 and 693, a bishop called Opolano is mentioned again in 829, followed by Wylesand and a certain Jimenez from 880 to 890. Even in the 10th century, important gaps are found in bishop succession, which is recorded and broken only after 1005. At the time of the Umayyad invasion in 711, the Visigothic king Roderick was fighting the Basques in Pamplona and had to turn his attention to the new enemy coming from the south. By 714–16, the Umayyad troops had reached the Basque-held Pamplona, with the town submitting apparently after a treaty was brokered between the inhabitants and the Arab military commanders. The position was then garrisoned by Berbers, who were stationed on the outside of the actual fortress, and established the cemetery unearthed not long ago at the castle square. During the following years, the Basques south of the Pyrenees don't seem to have shown much resistance to the Moorish thrust, and Pamplona may even have flourished as a launching point and centre of assembly for their expeditions into Gascony. In 740, the Wali Uqba ibn al-Hayy imposed direct central Cordovan discipline on the city. However, in 755 the last governor of Al-Andalus, Yusuf al-Fihri, sent an expedition north to quash Basque unrest near Pamplona, resulting in the defeat of the Arab army. From 755 until 781, Pamplona remained autonomous, probably relying on regional alliances. Although sources are not clear, it seems apparent that in 778 the town was in hands of a Basque local or a Muslim rebel faction loyal to the Franks at the moment of Charlemagne's crossing of the Pyrenees to the south. However, on his way back from the failed expedition to Saragossa in August, the walls and probably the town were destroyed by Charlemagne, out of fear that the anti-Frankish party strong in the town might use the position against him. After Abd al-Rahman I's conquest, Pamplona and its hinterland remained in a state of shaky balance between Franks, regional Andalusian lords and central Cordovan rule, all of whom proved unable to permanently secure dominance over the Basque region. To a considerable extent, that alternation reflected the internal struggles of the Basque warrior nobility. After the Frankish defeat at Roncesvalles, Pamplona switched again to Cordovan rule. After Abd al-Rahman's expedition captured the stronghold in 781, a wali, a governor, was imposed Mutarif ibn Musa up to the 799 rebellion. In that year, the Pamplonese, possibly led by a certain Velasco, stirred against their governor, but later the inhabitants provided some support for the Banu Qasi Fortune ibn Musa's uprising. This regional revolt was shortly after suppressed by the Cordovan emir Hisham, who re-established order, but failed to retain his grip on the town. Since the Pamplonese returned to Frankish suzerainty in 806, a Muslim cemetery containing about 200 human remains mingled with Christian tombs was unearthed in 2003 at the castle square, bearing witness to an important Muslim presence in the city during this period. But further research was stopped by the destruction of this and other historic evidence as decided by the city council, headed by Mayor Yolanda Barcina. Following a failed expedition to the town led by Louis the Pious around 812, allegiance to the Franks collapsed after an echoist arose to prominence. Moreover, he was crowned as King of Pamplona in 824, when he himself and the Banu Qasi gained momentum in the wake of the victorious Second Battle of Roncesvalles. The new kingdom, inextricably linked to the Banu Qasi of Tudela, strengthened its independence from the weakened Frankish Empire and Cordoban Emirate. During this period, Pamplona was not properly a town but just a kind of fortress. In 924, Cordovan sources describe Pamplona as not being especially gifted by nature, with its inhabitants being poor, not eating enough and dedicated to banditry. They are reported to speak Basque for the most part, which makes them incomprehensible. On the 24th of July, after Christian troops and citizens fled, troops from Cordova sacked Pamplona, destroying houses and buildings including its celebrated church. The town only regained its urban and human shape after the end of raids by Vikings and Andalusians on the province, especially after 1083. Traffic on the Way of St. James brought prosperity and new cultures via travelers from north of the Pyrenees. 3 boroughs and 1 city from the 11th century. Reviving economic development allowed Pamplona to recover its urban life. The bishops of Pamplona recovered their ecclesiastical leading role. During the previous centuries, isolated monasteries, especially Leyra, had actually held the religious authority. The pilgrimages to Santiago de Compostela contributed a lot to revive the commercial and cultural exchanges with Christian Europe beyond the Pyrenees. In the 12th century, the city enlarged with 2 new separate burgos, San Fermín and San Nicolas. The population of local Navarrese mainly confined to the original urban nucleus. The Navarre area was swelled by Occitan merchants and artisans. The boroughs showed very distinct features both socially and culturally, and were almost always engaged in quarrels among themselves. The most dramatic episode was the burning of the borough San Nicolas in 1258 and the destruction of the Navarre area by the other 2 boroughs and the massacre of its population in 1276. The site was abandoned for nearly 50 years. With regards to the outer defense walls of the city, the southern side was the weakest flank of the city, and the Navarrese king Louis I built a castle in the early 14th century in the site known today as Plaza del Castillo. Eventually, King Charles III decreed the unification of the boroughs in a single city in 1423. The feuds between boroughs had been partly ignited by disputes over the use of the Gulf dividing the 3 boroughs. So after Charles III's unification, the Gulf was filled and on its site a common space laid out on the present-day City Hall. The walls dividing the boroughs were demolished. During the late 15th century, Pamplona bore witness to power struggles between the Beaumont and Agramunt confederacies and external military interventions. Several times the stronghold was taken over by different factions and foreign forces, like the ones sent by Ferdinand II of Aragon. Queen Catherine I was a minor and often absent from Pamplona, but eventually she married John III in 1494, an event celebrated with joy in the city. However, Navarre continued divided. A fortress city, after the 1512 conquest and annexation of Navarre to Spain, Pamplona remained as capital of the semi-autonomous Kingdom of Navarre, which preserved its own institutions and laws. Pamplona became a Castilian-Spanish outpost at the foot of the Western Pyrenees. After the Castilian conquest, King Ferdinand V ordered in 1513 the demolition and removal of the medieval castle and the city's monasteries, as well as the building of a new castle in a very close place. In 1530, with Navarre under Spanish military occupation, the Castilian viceroy was still expecting a French invasion, and in fear of a possible revolt of the city dwellers, he requested an additional 1,000-strong force from what he called healthy land, i.e., Castile, besides the 1,000 stationed already in Navarre. The progressive artillery demanded a complete renewal of the fortified system. Starting in 1569, King Philip II built the fortifications at Pamplona, to designs by Giovan Giacomo Palieri and Vespasiano Gonzaga. The citadel in the south of the town is a pentagonal star fort. Philip had the city bounded by walls that made it almost a regular pentagon. The modernization of the walls was intended mainly to keep locals in check and strengthen the outpost Pamplona had become on the border with independent Navarre, a close ally of France. The walls that exist today date from the late 16th to 18th centuries. During the 18th century, Pamplona was considerably beautified and its urban services improved. A continuous water supply was established and the streets were paved, among many other enhancements. Rich aristocrats and businessmen also built their mansions. In the 19th century, this fortress city played a key role in several wars in which Spain was involved. During the Peninsular War of the Napoleonic Wars, French troops occupied the city by launching a coup de main and seized the city in 1808 and remained in it until the French forces were compelled to surrender on the 31st of October 1813 due to starvation, having been blockaded in the town for 4 months by the Spanish army under Enrique José O'Donnell. During the Carlist Wars, Pamplona was each time controlled by the liberals, not just because the few liberals that lived in Navarre were mainly Pamplones, but because of the governmental control over the fortified city. Although Carlist rebels easily ruled the countryside, the government army had no problem in dominating the walled capital of Navarre. Nevertheless, during the last Carlist War, modern artillery operated by Carlists from surrounding mountains showed that the old walls would not be enough in the face of a stronger enemy. Thus, the government decided to build a fort on the top of Mount San Cristobal, just 3 kilometers north of Pamplona. Due to its military role, the city could not grow outside its walled belt. Furthermore, building in the closest area to the walls was banned to avoid any advantage for a besieger. Thus the city could only grow by increasing its housing density. Higher and narrower houses were built and courtyards gradually disappeared. During the 19th century, road transportation improved, and the railway came in 1860. Nevertheless, industry in Pamplona as well as in Navarre as a whole was weak during the century of the Industrial Revolution. Basically, no industrial development was feasible in such a constrained fortress city. After a slight modification of the Star Fort allowed an expansion of just 6 blocks in 1888. The First World War demonstrated that the fortified system of Pamplona was already obsolete. In 1915, the army allowed the destruction of the walls and abolished the building ban in the city's surroundings. The southern side of the walls was destroyed and the other 3 remained as they did not hinder urban growth. The Star Fort continued to serve as a military facility until 1964, but just as a garrison. Pamplona has in recent years taken great care to integrate and preserve its fortifications for modern use. In October 2014, working with the city of Bayonne, Pamplona hosts an international conference, Fortified Heritage, Management and Sustainable Development. The website is in English, French and Spanish. Available on a growing website are 2 free ebooks, with copious color photographs on Pamplona's fortifications. Published in 2011 is 5 Living Centuries of an Impregnable Fortresses about the city's citadel, and A Walk Round the Pamplona Fortifications. Industrialization and modernization freed from its military function. Pamplona could lead the process of industrialization and modernization in which Navarre was involved during the 20th century, especially during its second half. The urban growth has been accompanied by the development of industry and services. Population growth has been the effect of an intense immigration process during the 1960s and 1970s. For the Navarrese countryside and from other less developed regions of Spain, mainly Castile and Leon and Andalusia. Since the 1990s, the immigration is coming mainly from abroad. Pamplona is listed as a city with one of the highest standards of living and quality of life in Spain. Its industry rate is higher than the national average, although it is threatened by delocalization. Crime statistics are lower than the national average, but cost of living, especially housing, is considerably higher. Thanks to its small size and an acceptable public transport service, there are no major transport problems. Political life is affected by bitter confrontation between parties with opposing Basque and Spanish national views. Urbanism. Like many other European cities, it is very easy to distinguish what is called the Old City and the new neighborhoods. The oldest part of the Old City is Navarre area, which corresponds with the Roman city. During the 12th century, the boroughs of St. Sernin and St. Nicholas were established. Charles III decreed the unification of the three places under a single municipality in 1423. The city did not expand until the late 19th century. In 1888, a modest modification of the Star Fort was allowed, but it just permitted the building of 6 blocks. It was called the Aranzadi. The southern walls were destroyed in 1915 and the 2 ensanche was planned. Its plan followed the grid pattern model designed by Ildefons Cerda for Barcelona. Its blocks were built between the 1920s and the 1950s. The prevailing housing model is apartment buildings of 5 to 8 floors. After the Civil War, 3 new zones of Pamplona began to grow: Rochapi, Milagrosa, and Chantrella. Only the last one was a planned neighborhood, the other 2 being disorderly growths. In 1957, the municipality designed the first general ordination plan for the city, which established the guidelines for further urban development. According to this, during the 1960s and 1970s saw the creation of new neighborhoods like San Juan, Itarama, San Jorge, Echebarcoits, and Urbina. The urban expansion of Pamplona exceeded the administrative limits of the city and involved municipalities like Baranon, Berlada, Villava, Ansoin, Berriozar, Noinahuate, and a larger metropolitan area. During the 1980s and 1990s, new neighborhoods were born: Azilagana, Mendibaldea, and Mendilore. Rochapi was profoundly renewed. The urban development of those new neighborhoods is very similar to other Spanish provincial capitals that experienced a similar aggressive economic development during the 60s and 70s. The urbanization of Pamplona, being from anterior designs, is not constrained by the grid plan. The apartment buildings are taller, never less than 5 floors, and many taller than 10. Industry, which previously coexisted with housing, was moved to industrial parks. In recent years, single-family house neighborhoods have grown in the metropolitan area. Zizurmer, Sizimena, Mutilveralta, Mutilverbaja, Olas, Esquiros, Artica, and Alzaza. New neighborhoods are being building in Butstin, Curry, Les Cairo, and Saraguran. The apartment buildings in those zones tend to be quite shorter, usually not more than 6 floors, and with more room for green areas. Economy. Pamplona has shifted in a few decades from a little administrative and even rural town to a medium-sized city of industry and services. The industry sector is diversified, although the most important activity is related to automobile industry. Volkswagen manufactures Polo model in its factory of Landauben, and there are many auxiliary industries that work for Volkswagen and other companies. Other remarkable industries are building materials, metalworking, and food processing. Renewable energy technologies are also an increasing economic sector, and neighboring Saraguran is the seat of the National Center for Renewable Energies and of Acciona Energia. Pamplona is the main commercial and services center of Navarre. Its area of influence is not beyond the province, except for the University of Navarre and its teaching hospital, which provide private educational and health services nationwide. education and culture. The city is home to 2 universities. The above-mentioned University of Navarre, a corporate work of Opus Dei founded in 1952, which is ranked as the best private university in Spain, and the Public University of Navarre, established by the government of Navarre in 1987. There is also a local branch of the UNED. The 2 most important museums in Pamplona are the Museo de Navarre, devoted to the archaeological and artistic heritage of Navarre, and the Museo Diocesano of Religious Art, located in the cathedral. Pamplona is the first Spanish city in the French Way of the Way of St. James. Pamplona has hosted the Sarasate Violin International Competition biennially since 1991, and the annual Punto de Vista International Documentary Film Festival, the most important Spanish documentary film festival since 2004. One of the more popular cultural expressions include the gigantes, which come out during festivals many times during the year. These are approximately 30-foot wooden statues that have a person inside that make them dance around the city. They represent each of the main continents of the world, including Europe, the Americas, Africa, and Asia. Transportation. Pamplona is linked by motorways with neighboring Zaragoza, San Sebastian, Vitoria, and Logroño. Since 2007, buses use a new bus station in the city centre that replaces the old one. The airport, operated by ENN located in Noan, schedules several flights daily to Madrid and Barcelona. There are railway links with Madrid, Zaragoza and northern Spain, operated by Renfe. High-speed train link with Zaragoza, Madrid, and Barcelona is not expected before 2014. A new railway station will be built in the southern part of the city. There are 23 daytime lines and 10 night lines of public buses, operated by TCC La Montanesa, the chartered company of the Mancomunidad de la Comarca de Pamplona.